Back to the daily grind. Thanks for checking out the channel. Make sure to subscribe if you're new and hook your boy up with a like if you're not a baby back bagel biting bitch boy, cause you know what time it is. It's full time.
MMA.
This Saturday, Pitbull will be looking to avenge his brother's loss to Benson Henderson in the main event of Bellator 183. Also, Nelson will be making his Bellator debut versus Javi Ayala in the co-main event. I honestly don't understand why that's the co-main event over Larkin and versus Paul Daley, but it is, and that's another big fight on this card. Paul Daley versus Larkin. Larkin's Bellator debut was spoiled by Douglas Lima, the welterweight champion at Bellator. Paul Daley, he's coming off of a loss to Rory McDonald in Bellator, so both of these guys are coming off of losses. We've also got Adam Piccolotti, undefeated fighter, versus Yamauchi on the card. And then we've got the return of Pico, one of Bellator's star prospects, coming up. He was a highly touted prospect. I had casual fans coming up to me saying, "Hey, you hear about Pico? He's going to be fighting at Bellator." I was like, "What? How the fuck do you know about Pico?" So Pico's highly touted. He's got a lot of eyes on him. He's 0-1 in his professional career, but he's going to be looking to even out the odds and go 1-1 versus Justin Lin. Justin Lin, man, I don't know though after what happened to Pico, but let's get into these predictions. Pico versus Justin Lin to start it off. Pico, as I said, is 0-1 in his MMA career. He's coming off of a loss to Zach Freeman at Bellator, New York, Madison Square Garden. That was Pico's debut. Zach Freeman was like 9-2, I believe, and he got a win over Pico. As highly touted as Pico was, it was his first fight. It was in bright lights, probably the brightest lights he's going to see for a while, being that it was Bellator's trip to Madison Square Garden. So now he's fighting Justin Lin, a fighter that's 7-3, who's coming off of 2 losses that were not in Bellator. But still, I mean, it's hard for me to pick a fighter that's only 20 years old and has 0 professional wins and only 1 professional fight. I mean, I picked him versus Zach Freeman just because how highly touted he was, and he came out there and looked like a guy that had 0 professional fights. So now he's going against a guy that's got 10 professional fights, and even though he's not fighting the top competition, I mean, he's got professional experience, Justin Lin. So it's really hard for me to pick Pico here, even though I want him to get the W. It's just hard to pick a guy that's 0-1 in his professional career. But that being said, Justin Lin hasn't been fighting for the UFC or Bellator, and Bellator, look, they don't even have his picture up on the fight card page. So it's like he's like I don't know if he's a late notice replacement or what for Pico, but Justin Lin is a Bellator newcomer, and Pico, man, even though he's got no professional fights, the thing about him is he grew up for MMA, to my understanding. He grew up like as a Golden Glove boxer. Like as a kid, he was boxing at the age of like 4, or wrestling at like the age of 4. Like from one of the story I was told of Pico, he grew up to be like the future of MMA. He's well-rounded. He's been training everything, well-rounded since he was a kid. So he supposedly is actually very skilled in all areas. So I'm going to go ahead and pick Pico one last time, I guess. Man, it's really hard. These Bellator predictions are really hard because you got guys like Justin Lin who you've never seen fight, and they haven't fought in Bellator or the UFC. And since there's so many lesser organizations, you don't know the difference between TWC and BC and LFR and TRL and all of these different organizations. So it's hard to judge the level of competitions these guys have been fighting. So that's why it's kind of hard for me to do these Bellator predictions. And they're probably, man, not going to be as successful as my UFC predictions, but it's still fun. Still makes the fights funner. So I'm picking Pico, fuck it. Next fight, we're going to Adam Piccolotti versus Yamauchi. Man, Yamauchi, yeah, this was another hard fight to pick. Yamauchi is 24-3. He's very young, successful, and active, man. He fought like 5 times in 2013, 4 times in 2012. He's only 24 years old, and he's got like 24 fights. It's pretty impressive, his resume, and he's got very, very successful. He was on like an 11-fight winning streak at one point, or some ridiculous winning streak, and he's this young, this many fights, very experienced, successful, man. And he's going against an undefeated fighter though, Adam Piccolotti. One thing about Yamauchi is he's got 3 losses, but a lot of his wins come to guys that only have 1 loss or 2 losses. You know, it'll be a guy that's 9-1 or 12-2 or some stuff like that when I was doing the research. So the guys he's beaten don't lose a lot. Adam Picolotti's 9-0. The last guy he beat was Brandon Gertz, if I remember correctly. I have it wrote down. Yeah, it was Brandon Gertz, and Brandon Gertz was 14-7. So he is undefeated, Adam Piccolotti, but the guys he beats have lost more times than some of the guys I looked up on Guidi Yamauchi's record. And that being said, also Adam Piccolotti, 3 of his last 4 wins have come by submission, and Guidi Yamauchi is a submission specialist. Out of like 21 or however many wins he had, I don't remember if it was 21 or 4, he over 15 of them, or 15 or more, were like submissions. This guy is a submission specialist, and Adam Piccolotti wins by submission, but I don't think he's going to be able to submit Yamauchi. So I'm picking Yamauchi in this fight. Looking forward to this whole card, man. Next, we got Paul Daley versus Lorenz Larkin. Gonna be another great fight, man. I like this whole main event for right here. This whole main card for Bellator, I want to watch all 5 of these fights. Lorenz Larkin versus Paul Daley. I'm gonna go ahead and pick Paul Daley. Paul Daley's more experienced overall. He's fought tougher competition, in my opinion. He's fought all around the world. He's 34 years old. He's coming off of a loss to Rory McDonald. And I believe he was scheduled for a fight with MVP, but he had to pull out of the fight, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure Paul Daley had to pull out of a fight with Michael Venom Page, and so now he's going to be fighting Lorenz Larkin. Paul Daley, 2 of his last 3 fights are losses, but it was to Rory McDonald and also the welterweight champion Douglas Lima. And so, I mean, even though 2 of his last 3 fights are losses, man, he's still fighting the best guys Bellator has to offer. And some of these, Rory McDonald, I mean, is arguably the #1 welterweight on the planet. Douglas Lima is the Bellator welterweight champion. So, I mean, it's not like he's out here losing to scrubs, that is Paul Daley. He's got a win over Brandon Ward, and before his, 2 of his last 3 fights, he was on a 4-fight winning streak before his last 3 fights. And so, I mean, he's just a little too experienced for Lorenz Larkin. They're around the same age, and he's probably, I don't know if he has double the fights, but man, he's got, let's see, he's got almost double the fights of Lorenz Larkin, and they're about the same age. He's been more active. He's fought more experienced guys, in my opinion. I mean, I don't know. Paul Daley is infamous for hitting Josh Koscheck after the bell, if you remember, and getting kicked out of the UFC. After that, I mean, I don't know about more experienced guys, because since then he hasn't fought for the UFC, but he's still been successful outside of the UFC, and he's fought guys like Jorge Masvidal outside of the UFC, and other big names in Bellator. I mean, for instance, Rory McDonald, Douglas Lima. And so, I mean, Paul Daley, probably, I think he's going to edge out this win versus Lorenz Larkin, who's 18-6 overall. He's coming off of a loss to Douglas Lima in his Bellator debut. It was the welterweight champion. So both of these guys have lost to the welterweight champion at Bellator recently. Lorenz Larkin before that was in the UFC, so that was his Bellator debut. He was 4-1 in the UFC before making the move to Bellator, with wins over Neil Magny and a split decision win over Jorge Masvidal. So Lorenz Larkin, he's a good welterweight, man, but like his win over Jorge Masvidal was a split decision. He did beat Neil Magny, but he came through and he lost to Douglas Lima. And if I'm remembering that fight correct, pretty sure Douglas Lima clipped him up. I don't remember exactly. I remember that it was on a big card, so I know I watched the fight, but I don't remember exactly. I don't remember if Lorenz Larkin had any big moments in that fight, but I do know he lost the unanimous decision. So next fight, co-main event, Javi Ayala versus Roy Nelson. Now, I mean, they've got it as the co-main event. It's a heavyweight fight. Heavyweight fights are usually always pretty fun because anybody's got the, can go out at any moment. You don't want to blink for a heavyweight fight. But Roy Nelson can actually take that out of a heavyweight fight. I mean, if he gets on top of a guy, he's had some fights that, you might hear the crowd boo, but it's all good though. Roy Nelson's making his Bellator debut at 41 years old, just signed with Bellator. Bellator is a home for some of these UFC veterans that are leaving the UFC 40 years plus. Bellator usually signs those guys, and now Roy Nelson, though, he's going to be fighting a guy, 29 years old. Roy Nelson's 41, my thought was, Bellator has a lot of guys like, Frank Mir, just some older heavyweights that I feel like they could match Roy Nelson up with. That'd be more, I don't know. I mean, the fact that they matched him up with this younger guy, but he's only like 10-6, or he's 10-5, Javi Ayala. So, I mean, he doesn't have the experience of Roy Nelson. So, I mean, that's why it's so hard for me to pick this fight. It's so hard. With Javi Ayala, you've got youth on his side. Roy Nelson, you've got experience on his side. Roy Nelson has definitely fought more experienced competition. He's fought the best guys in the world. But this is a heavyweight fight. So, it's so hard to pick this fight for me. I don't know if Roy Nelson's going to have a little resurgence in Bellator. I mean, I don't know what's allowed in Bellator that's not allowed in the UFC. I don't know if there's some sort of, like, stuff that, you know what I'm saying, like testosterone. I'm not too hip on fucking steroids and PEDs, but I'm not sure if there's something Roy Nelson can take in Bellator that would help him out that he couldn't take in the UFC with USADA. So I don't know what we're gonna see out of Roy Nelson. I do know he's he's got 2 wins and 5 losses in his last 7 fights. And Jesse Ayala is the exact opposite. He's got 5 wins and 2 losses in his last 7 fights. But as I said, it's not versus UFC competition. It's not versus the best in the world. Roy Nelson's got losses in his last 5 fights to Volkov, Derek Lewis, Barnett, Overeem, Mark Hunt. I mean, he's losing to the best guys over in the UFC. Now he's coming to Bellator, and Javi Ayala, even though he's younger, and I think I'm giving Javi Ayala the nod here. But that's because, I mean, it's hard for me to, I don't know, man, because if Roy Nelson can get a win, come through, maybe call out Frank Mir or somebody, man, I would love that to happen. But it's just hard for me to pick Roy Nelson, who's, lost 5 of his last 7 fights, 41 years old, and he's fighting against a guy that's coming off of 2 knockout wins, although Javi Ayala is 2-2 in his last 4 fights, but his last 2 wins were both knockout wins. But I don't know, man. I've seen a couple of Javi Ayala's highlight clips before this. He seems like he's got some decent striking. I mean, he shows he can get clipped up when he moves in. He puts pressure on guys. He's got some nice leg kicks. He seems like he likes to use his boxing, but he's got clipped up by some guys when he comes in. I don't know if Roy Nelson's got the reaction and the reflexes to really clip him up like some of these other guys he's fought, Javi Ayala. He's lost in his 5 losses, 2 of them were to the same guy. So, I mean, I don't know what that says. So this is like I said, all of these fights are really hard to pick, man. I wouldn't be surprised if I got all of these wrong. I almost didn't want to do these because I have success with my picks, and it's like these ones are more of a talk. Even when you do the research on these, like you'd have to do days of research to really make accurate predictions here, unless you know a lot of these fighters and you watched them in these other leagues that you don't know the names of. Like there's a Cage Warriors, and then there's also the Warriors Cage, then there's an ABC, and then there's a Colorado Fighting League, CF. Like there's literally 50 organizations not named Bellator in the UFC. So I don't know, whenever I look at these guys' records, oh, okay, so he's coming from the WMR. I don't know if the WMR is better than the TWC, the TWC. So it's hard to really know the level of competition some of these guys have faced, which is, it's a little more evident when you're making predictions on UFC fights. So with that being said, I wouldn't be surprised if I got some of these wrong. I might fuck around and come through and get every single prediction on this card right, like I did last week with the fuck you tab, Matt. Put some respect on my predictions. Let's get to the main event. Benson Henderson versus Patricky Pitbull. Benson Henderson's already fought Patricio Pitbull, which is Pitbull's brother. These are the Pitbull brothers. He's fighting the second Pitbull brother. I didn't know that before I started doing these predictions. I thought it was like a rematch versus the same Pitbull brother, but no, he's fighting the other Pitbull brother. Benson Henderson is 1-2 in Bellator. Since he's signed with Bellator, he's got 2 losses and 1 win. His only win in Bellator was to the younger, more active, more successful Pitbull brother. His 2 losses in Bellator have came to Michael Chandler, I believe, and also Korshakov, yeah. So he's lost to some of the cream of the crop over in Bellator. He beat Patricio Pitbull, who's like 30-4. He's also 1 year younger than Patricky Pitbull. So he's the younger brother. He's the more successful and experienced brother, because even though he's younger, he's got more fights. He's got like 34 fights compared to his brother, who's got like 25. So Patricky Pitbull, he's 4, and this is the brother that Benson's actually fighting. He's 4-2 in his last 6 fights. His losses have came to Chandler and Derek Anderson, which was a split decision to Derek Anderson. His most recent win is to Josh Thompson. So I mean, he's beat at least, you know, some decent guys, but like I said, he's still the worst Pitbull brother as far as out of the two. He's got less experience, he's less youth, and less success in the octagon. So with that being said, if you can beat up the good brother, I mean the better, more experienced brother, I gotta pick you to beat the other brother, you know what I'm saying? So even though this is going to be fun to watch because he's already fought one of the brothers, man, it's kind of, you know, interesting because the Pitbull brothers, you'll see them, man, whenever one of their brothers loses or something, the other one might fucking around and getting, you know, that you see them screaming cage side, and they're in it together. Sometimes they're even in the corner and shit, you know. So it's an interesting dynamic, the fact that he's fighting the other brother and he's already beat one of them. It'd be kind of like somebody beating Nate Diaz and then now it's time to fight Nick Diaz. Actually, it'd be the opposite way around because Nick Diaz is the better Diaz brother. So it'd be like somebody beating Nick Diaz and now they're going to fight Nate Diaz to see if Nate Diaz can avenge his brother's loss. And I don't know, it's fun. So I'll be watching this whole card. Those are my predictions. Thanks for checking out the fucking video. It is what it is. Let the haters know what the fuck you tell me in the comments. I'm out.